Also, you might want to check out The Eyes of Tammy. The Eyes of Tammy is a song everybody should hear. Hank Williams' son, Randall Hank, finally said out loud what fans had been whispering about for years. At 76, surrounded by memories and ghosts of the past, he spoke the words he once promised he'd never share. Why now? What made him break decades of silence? For a man who lived in the long shadow of his father, this admission doesn't just bring up old wounds. It threatens to change the story of Hank Williams forever. The Allman Brothers, some of the hottest groups back then in '75. Things were opened up. We're going to start doing some shows. We were coming down from about 10,800 feet on the Montana-Idaho border. Hank Williams' son raises questions about father's death. From the start, Hank Williams Jr. had the strange burden of losing a father he barely knew. He was a legend whose final hours were covered in mixed-up stories and silence. As he grew older, the holes in the official story bothered him, creating a lot of doubts about how much was the truth and how much had been hidden. The official story was that Hank Williams died of a drug and alcohol-related heart attack in the back seat of his car while he was just 29 years old. He was found not responding by his driver, Charles Carr, at a gas station after he had been treated with shots of morphine and vitamin B12 by a doctor earlier. But this official version has raised a lot of questions about Hank Williams' death, especially as Hank Jr. grew up. One of the reasons why he had so many questions about his father's death was the mixed-up eyewitness accounts. Most official reports had said that Hank died quietly in the back seat of a Cadillac. But it doesn't match up with the reports of strange hospital calls, stops along the road, and ideas that his body was already not responding before many of the journey's details even began. Then there was the disturbing mess of lost, sealed, and destroyed medical records. Even after Hank Sr. had died for many years, they never publicly released the poison reports, and some files from the hospital or doctors remain impossible to see, or they simply disappeared from the surface of the earth. For a man that had a lot of questions about the death of his father, this kind of thing allowed suspicion to grow and not fade. Hank Jr. started to hear questions and rumors about his father's death as he grew up, raising a lot of concerns. He heard about prescription drugs and medical mistakes, only adding fuel to the mystery. Hank Sr. struggled with terrible back pain and spine problems and was already on sedatives and painkillers. Hank Sr. had also seen a questionable doctor named Toby Marshall who wrote him prescriptions for morphine and chloral hydrate under some questionable credentials. Hank Jr. started to wonder, was the dose too heavy or was he under the influence at a deadly moment? Perhaps the most haunting mixed-up story for Hank Jr. as he grew up was the multiple stories that came up depending on who you asked. The driver, Charles Carr, stuck to one version, while the hotel staff, porters, lawmen, and later investigators said something different. Some claim that Williams was too sick to walk. Others say porters carried him. They even say he was aware in Knoxville or he was not responding. When Hank Williams' son, Randall Hank, started noticing all these mixed-up stories, he decided to investigate further and later came forward, admitting what we already know. Hidden recording and hints of something bad. For Randall Hank, he spent decades piecing together his father's final hours, and that caused him to stumble on a startling discovery. There was a hidden tape recording that seemed to speak of puzzles and fear and not just pain. When Hank Jr. found the tape among a collection of his father's things stored in a box long forgotten, he discovered that his suspicions might have been right. His father's death isn't as normal as it seems. When he finally played the tape back, it showed Hank Sr. humming and strumming in a private moment. He wasn't performing for fans, but wrestling with dread. Over the guitar came lines that weren't part of any published song from Hank Sr. Over the guitar came lines that weren't part of any published song. Broken-up lyrics muttered in quiet tones. One chilling phrase, "They know what I know." Another, "Men in suits," not a poetic reference to business, but something darker. Then layered beneath his voice, almost as an afterthought, a second voice. "You won't make it to New Year's." When Hank Jr. heard this, he tried to make sense of it and told others. But to most ears, it sounded paranoid or like a man haunted by addiction and growing loneliness. But for Hank Jr., who had long sensed the gaps in what people said versus what people stared at in silence, the tape confirmed what rumors had hinted all along. Something about his father's end didn't add up. Hank Sr. had died when Jr. was only around 3 or 4 years old, and growing up, he heard a lot of snippets. Old friends, stagehands, and family members talked about moments when his father looked terrified. One backstage worker reportedly saw Hank Sr. just days before his death, staring over his shoulder, pale and anxious, and acting as though danger was coming. Another voice claimed to have seen unidentified men in dark suits lurking near the hotel where Williams was staying, as though watching. People casually dismissed these stories, but to Hank Jr., each one was a cracked window into the possibility that Hank Sr. wasn't just worn down by drugs or alcohol. Maybe there was something even worse going on. There's also the question of reason, and Hank Jr. has questioned this. Many believe Hank Sr. was growing unhappy with the control industry people, promoters, and managers had over him. Some say he had plans to break away and speak out, exposing backstage power abuses. If true, that would have made him an inconvenient man in an industry that made money off his legend, and maybe someone wanted him quiet. Of course, there is no smoking gun. The tape hasn't been fully verified in public records. Men in Suits remains vague, and many witnesses are gone or their memories have faded. Yet, the combination of real evidence like the recording, eyewitness hints, and Hank Jr.'s own lifelong questions gives this part of the story its power. After Hank Sr. had died, his son had a lot of questions, but he had also lost his father figure before they could even become closer. This pushed him to a tough life where he struggled to live up to his late father's legacy. Loss of father figure. From the moment Hank Williams Jr. was born, he carried an emptiness that could never fully be filled. His father, Hank Williams, Sr., died when Jr. was only about 3 years old, meaning he lost the chance to truly know his dad. He couldn't grow up with him guiding, teaching, or even just present in ordinary moments. Growing up, Jr. was surrounded by stories, photos, and public myth, but not by the ordinary moments a child has with a father to talk, learn, argue, or laugh. The father figure he should have known existed mostly through second-hand accounts and legend. That distance created uncertainty, not closure. That early absence shaped most of Hank Jr.'s life. Without a father figure, he didn't only have memories, but also expectations. His mother, Audrey, and the music world tried to mold Jr. into a continuation of his father. He tried to copy Hank Sr.'s singing style, stage presence, and even lifestyle. For a young child, that meant carrying a legacy whether he wanted to or not. There were consequences because of that missing figure. The desire for a real dad undercut the applause. Without that personal relationship, Junior's identity felt partly undefined and partly borrowed. He'd perform, yes, but there was always tension between honoring the father he lost and finding the man he was. This tension planted long-term emotional challenges, longing, resentment, and often loneliness. Since Hank Jr. had lost his father, he was even more interested in finding out the truth about his death for closure. Because his father's death was always covered in mystery. The conflicting stories, missing records, and rumors of medical cover-ups had caused Hank Jr. to dig deeper. The emotional gap from losing his dad so early made him hunger for answers. For a long time, he believed that as long as he understood what really happened to his dad, he would be able to fill part of the emptiness left from his absence. With every story he uncovered, he tried to piece together a picture of the father he never got to know closely. But as he dealt with the loss of his father from a young age, there was also a pressure to copy him and carry on the legacy. Pressure to copy and carry legacy. From the moment Hank Williams Jr. could walk, talk, or step into a microphone, the world saw him as a reflection of Hank Williams Sr. His father's legend was baked into his identity. Every stage, microphone, and singing lesson came tied up with the expectation, be like him, sing like him, live up to a myth. And for Junior, that expectation wasn't just heavy, but it was suffocating. Junior has spoken a lot about what it was like to grow into that role. As a boy, it felt almost magical. In an interview, he once said, "It was fun for the little boy to do Hank Williams, but it was hell for the man." As he got older, the costume of his father's image and the expectations from promoters, fans, and even friends started to change. When Junior was young, he used to act out Hank Sr. songs, record covers of Your Cheatin' Heart, and more. Those early years were filled with applause, but he lacked the chance to simply be himself. Most people just wanted to see a comeback of his father and not his own self. This made it very hard for him to create his own path. Since his father had died young, he couldn't show off his full potential, and so everyone wanted to see this in his son's life instead. The pressure wasn't only external internally. Junior wrestled with identity. Songs, albums, and performances often felt more like obligations than expressions. He said that in some parts of his career, his name was used against him. But the pressure wasn't only this way. Even the entire music industry and fans were trying to make him some kind of Hank the First 2.0. Sometimes even trying to copy his father's style or overlay new recordings. Pressure from the music industry. From nearly the moment Hank Williams Jr. could carry a guitar, the music industry around him made its expectations crystal clear. Be like your father. Audiences, promoters, and even those closest to him nudged Jr. toward becoming Hank Sr. 2.0. That pressure shaped not only his early life, but also many of the deep wounds he would carry into adulthood. In fact, by age 5, the expectations had already started. He remembered an interview he had with ABC saying, "It was always your daddy went through this stuff. You'll have to go through it. We have to go through these things. Depression, that's a big sport to a lot of people. I think it was just drilled into me a lot." Surprisingly, it wasn't only about copying his father's success in songs, but also his struggles with alcohol, pills, and depression. They actually thought that his dad's songs were so great because of all that he had been through and that the only way for his son to become a success was to go through the same struggles. When he was on the road as a kid, he covered his father's songs and he heard comments like, "Hey, give old Hank a little drink here." Such things were more than cruel jokes, but they were signposts showing what people expected. Act like him, live like him, and even hurt like him. This kind of copying also extended into his recordings. In one early example, he said that his father's band was used, the name was taken advantage of, and even vocals were mixed to suggest connection with his dad. He once described it bluntly, saying, "I had a manager later on where it was exploited to the point of like Daddy's original band and making records with his voice over mine, and it got a little out of hand there." With the fame of his father, the strategy actually achieved commercial success. But for Junior, artistically and emotionally, it created a pressure cooker. For Junior, this success meant that he was walking on a tight rope. He began to wonder, should he satisfy fans and continue in this way or break away and be true to himself? This led to an identity conflict that took a major toll on his mental health. Identity conflict and mental health. For Junior, the journey of being Randall Hank was never simple. He lived a life in someone else's shadow. A shadow cast by one of country music's biggest legends.